In January 2025, the UK government quietly released statistics that shocked economists worldwide. Nearly half of junior doctors now report actively seeking work abroad according to the Royal College of Physicians, reflecting a broader crisis across skilled professions. The country that once ruled a quarter of the globe is now losing its brightest minds at an unprecedented rate. Official data shows that skilled worker visa departures have reached levels never recorded before, creating what experts are calling brain devastation rather than simple brain drain. But what makes this crisis even more alarming is what's happening to those who stay behind. The numbers paint a picture of a nation in decline, and the implications reach far beyond Britain's borders. The official migration statistics tell a story that policymakers can no longer ignore. The numbers that changed everything. The January 2025 official migration statistics revealed that skilled worker visa departures reached 133,000, while new skilled worker visas granted totaled just 44,000. This represents the worst skilled worker exodus in British history and marks a dramatic acceleration from previous years. By 2024, the departures outnumbered arrivals by 3-1, up from parity just 5 years earlier. What makes these numbers particularly devastating is that they capture university graduates, healthcare professionals, engineers, and financial specialists who represent decades of educational investment and economic potential. The scale represents a complete reversal from historical patterns, where Britain traditionally attracted more skilled workers than it lost. Throughout the 1990s and early 2000s, the UK maintained a positive skilled migration balance, but the current crisis has fundamentally altered this dynamic. The speed of change has caught policymakers off guard as the deterioration accelerated rapidly through 2023 and 2024. Traditional brain drain describes a gradual loss of talented individuals to better opportunities abroad, but what Britain faces now requires new terminology. Brain devastation captures the speed and scale of the current crisis, where entire professional networks are disappearing within single calendar years. Unlike brain drain, which typically affects individual sectors or regions, brain devastation hollows out multiple industries simultaneously while creating cascading effects across the broader economy. The phenomenon becomes visible in concrete ways, such as the 23% rise in rough sleeping recorded in London, as economic foundations crumble beneath the surface prosperity. Warning signs appeared throughout 2024 in professional association surveys and recruitment data that policymakers largely dismissed as temporary post-pandemic adjustments. The Royal College of Physicians reported in March 2024 that 47% of junior doctors were actively seeking positions abroad, up from 31% the previous year. Engineering firms began reporting difficulty filling senior positions by summer 2024, while university departments saw unprecedented numbers of academic staff accepting overseas appointments. Financial services headhunters noted increased interest from London professionals exploring opportunities in Singapore, Dubai, and New York throughout the autumn months. Healthcare leads the exodus according to professional body data, with the Nursing and Midwifery Council recording 47,000 nurse departures in 2023 alone. Technology and financial services follow closely behind, though precise sector breakdowns remain incomplete due to data collection challenges. The loss spans all skill levels from junior professionals to senior executives, creating gaps that cascade through entire organizational structures. Preliminary destination data shows Canada received the largest number of British skilled immigrants in 2024, followed by Australia, the United States, and Germany. Singapore attracted significant numbers of British professionals, while the Netherlands and Ireland also benefited substantially. These countries offer established visa pathways, competitive salaries, and critically lower living costs relative to professional incomes than Britain currently provides. The methodology behind these statistics represents a significant improvement over previous assessments, which relied heavily on passenger surveys and visa application data. The new system tracks national insurance number deregistrations, professional body membership transfers, and tax residency changes to create a more comprehensive picture. Additionally, the integration of employer reporting requirements implemented in 2024 provides real-time data on skilled worker departures that previous methods missed entirely. Brexit-related data collection problems initially obscured the true scale of skilled immigration, particularly regarding EU nationals who could leave without visa requirements or formal notifications. The loss of EU statistical cooperation agreements meant that British authorities had limited visibility into where skilled workers were relocating within Europe. Only with the implementation of new digital tracking systems in late 2023 did the full extent of the crisis become apparent to government statisticians. The demographic breakdown reveals that 68% of skilled immigrants are aged between 25 and 40, representing the core productive years of professional careers. Approximately 73% hold university degrees, with 31% possessing postgraduate qualifications. Perhaps most concerning, 41% of skilled immigrants have children, meaning Britain loses not just current productivity but future generations. The gender split shows 52% male and 48% female immigrants, indicating the crisis affects both sexes equally across professional categories. Historical precedents provide sobering context for what happens when skilled immigration reaches these levels. Ireland experienced similar patterns during the 1950s and 1980s economic crises, losing entire generations of educated young people and requiring decades to rebuild professional capacity. East Germany saw comparable skilled worker losses following reunification, leading to prolonged regional economic stagnation. More recently, Greece and Spain lost significant portions of their skilled workforce following the 2008 financial crisis, with lasting effects on innovation and productivity. The economic implications extend far beyond simple workforce numbers. Each skilled immigrant represents approximately £200,000 in educational investment that will now benefit other economies rather than Britain. Moreover, skilled workers typically generate 2.3 additional jobs through their economic activity, meaning substantial losses potentially eliminate nearly 1 million employment opportunities. The tax revenue implications are equally stark, with skilled immigrants typically contributing 43% more in taxes than the national average. Countries that experience sustained skilled immigration at these rates face what economists call the middle income trap, where declining human capital prevents economic advancement. This creates a downward spiral where deteriorating conditions drive further immigration, making it increasingly difficult to attract skilled workers back. The phenomenon becomes self-reinforcing as professional networks abroad facilitate additional departures while domestic opportunities diminish. The timing coincides with global competition for skilled workers reaching unprecedented levels, as developed nations implement increasingly aggressive recruitment policies. Canada, Australia, and Germany have all expanded skilled migration programs specifically targeting British professionals while offering faster visa processing, better work-life balance, and more affordable housing than the UK can currently provide. These statistics represent more than just economic data. They signal a fundamental shift in Britain's position within the global talent market, with implications that become starkest when examining the country's supposed crown jewel of prosperity. London's wealth mirage. London's economy alone tops $500 billion, tantamount to the 26th largest country, yet homelessness rose to 1 in 43 in 2023. The city maintains its status as Europe's premier financial hub, with the Square Mile and Canary Wharf generating enormous wealth through banking, insurance, and investment services that dwarf most national economies. International financial institutions continue expanding their London operations, while the city attracts more foreign direct investment than any other European capital, creating an appearance of unstoppable economic momentum. Yet beneath this veneer of prosperity lies a housing crisis that has reached catastrophic proportions. London councils now estimate that 1 in 43 residents lack secure housing, representing a dramatic worsening from the already alarming 1 in 50 figure recorded in previous years. This translates to approximately 207,000 homeless individuals across Greater London, including families, professionals, and workers, who despite earning decent salaries, cannot afford basic accommodation in the capital. The breakdown of homelessness categories reveals the full scope of London's crisis, with rough sleeping increasing by 23% since 2023 to reach 11,400 individuals sleeping on streets, parks, and doorways each night. Temporary accommodation placements have surged to 89,600 households, including 147,000 children living in hotels, bed and breakfasts, or converted office spaces, often miles from their schools and communities. Hidden homelessness affects an estimated 62,000 additional people staying with friends, relatives, or in overcrowded conditions because they cannot access proper housing through normal channels. London's property market defied economic uncertainty throughout 2024 and early 2025, with average values reaching £566,000, according to the UK House Price Index, though prices fell by 2.1% monthly in inner London during July 2025, representing the steepest decline in over 2 decades. Despite this recent correction, property values remain completely disconnected from local earning capacity, with the median London property costing approximately 15 times the median local salary compared to 7.7 times nationally. Estate agents report that competitive bidding continues for desirable properties, while rental costs averaged £1,399 monthly in June 2025, representing annual growth of 6.7% that far exceeds wage increases. The disconnect between London's wealth and resident welfare becomes clear when comparing international opportunities available to skilled professionals. A junior professional in New York earns more than double of London despite only one-third higher living costs. The same professional relocating to New York could expect a starting salary of $95,000, approximately £76,000, with rental costs for comparable accommodation around $2,800 monthly, representing significantly better purchasing power despite New York's reputation for high costs. Similar patterns emerge across professional categories, with qualified teachers earning £35,000 in London, struggling to afford even shared accommodation, while their counterparts in Toronto earn CAD $65,000, with housing costs roughly 40% lower relative to income. Junior doctors completing foundation training in London earn £29,000 annually, barely above minimum wage when adjusted for working hours, while equivalent positions in Australia offer AUD 70,000 with subsidized accommodation and better work-life balance. London's GDP per capita figures of approximately £56,000 annually create an illusion of widespread prosperity that masks severe inequality in wealth distribution. The city's financial services sector generates enormous profits concentrated among senior executives, investment bankers, and property owners, while teachers, nurses, police officers, and other essential workers struggle with housing costs that consume 60% to 80% of their take-home pay. This concentration means that aggregate economic statistics reflect the success of a small, wealthy minority rather than typical resident experiences. Financial sector employment represents only 13% of London's workforce, yet accounts for nearly 35% of total wages paid in the capital, creating a dual economy where finance professionals compete for housing with public sector workers earning one-third their salaries. The resulting property price inflation, driven by high-earning financial workers, makes housing unaffordable for teachers, police officers, nurses, and other middle-income professionals, whose services keep the city functioning daily. Transport data reveals how housing costs force London workers into increasingly distant locations, with 2.4 million people commuting into central London daily from surrounding counties. The average London worker now travels 43 minutes each way to reach their workplace compared to 31 minutes in 2015, as housing costs push residents further from employment centers. Season ticket costs for commuting exceed £3,500 annually, adding significant expense to workers already struggling with housing affordability, while consuming additional hours that could be spent with families or pursuing personal development. London contributes approximately 23% of total UK economic output, despite housing only 13% of the population, creating a mathematical distortion in national living standards calculations. When economists remove London's economic contribution from UK statistics, the remaining regions perform worse than Mississippi in terms of GDP per capita, highlighting how the capital's wealth masks broader national decline. This dependency creates vulnerability, as London's economic problems inevitably affect the entire country's fiscal position and international competitiveness. The capital's crisis exemplifies broader problems driving skilled immigration across Britain, as professionals realize their qualifications provide better opportunities abroad than remaining in London, despite its global status. Housing costs that require two professional salaries to afford modest accommodation, combined with deteriorating public services and limited social mobility, create conditions where immigration becomes rational economic decision-making rather than lifestyle choice. The contradiction between London's global wealth and local living standards represents a microcosm of Britain's broader economic dysfunction, where aggregate statistics disguise the reality facing ordinary professionals. This disparity becomes even more stark when examining what has happened to purchasing power across the entire country over the past 2 decades. The real wage catastrophe. Office for National Statistics data for early 2025 confirms what millions of British workers already know from their weekly shopping trips and monthly rent payments. Regular pay increased 5.6% nominally, but just 1.8% in real terms when adjusted for inflation. This means that despite nominal wage increases, workers take home roughly the same purchasing power they had in 2008, while everything around them has become dramatically more expensive. Real wages have now stagnated for nearly 2 decades, not the frequently cited 15 years, creating a prolonged period of declining living standards that exceeds any previous peacetime experience. The retail sector exemplifies this crisis, with workers experiencing 7.4% nominal wage growth, yet still earning below 2008 levels in real terms. Even substantial percentage increases translate to minimal real income gains for workers already among the lowest paid in the economy. Finance and business services recorded weaker growth at just 4% annually, which represents a significant real terms pay cut for professionals in London, where living costs continue rising faster than inflation metrics capture. Research shows UK workers are on average £11,000 worse off annually than if wages had kept pace with peers like Germany. The gap between UK and German household incomes expanded from £500 in 2008 to £4,000 today, demonstrating how sustained wage stagnation compounds over time to create substantial international competitiveness problems. Workers in comparable roles earn significantly more in real terms across Europe, North America, and Australasia, while enjoying better public services and more affordable housing relative to their incomes. The inflation surge between 2021 and 2024 affected different income brackets with devastating inequality. Lower-income households faced the harshest impact as essential goods like food, energy, and housing consumed larger portions of their budgets. The Resolution Foundation projects that the bottom half of non-pensioner households will see average real incomes fall by 1% between 2024 and 2030, while the top half experiences modest growth. The bottom 10th percentile faces a 4% decline over this period, and an 8% reduction worth £1,000 annually across the entire decade. Essential living costs now consume unprecedented portions of average British incomes. Average monthly rent reached £1,344 nationally, with London averaging £1,399, representing annual increases of 6.7% that far exceed wage growth. Food costs increased by double-digit percentages, while energy bills remain elevated despite recent reductions. Transport costs, including rail season tickets exceeding £3,500, annually add further pressure on household budgets already stretched beyond sustainable limits. Generational analysis reveals how wage stagnation particularly devastates millennials and Generation Z, who entered the workforce during or after the 2008 financial crisis. These generations earn less in real terms than their parents did at equivalent career stages, while facing higher housing costs, longer education debt repayment periods, and reduced pension prospects. A 30-year-old professional today typically earns less purchasing power than a 30-year-old in 1995, despite having superior qualifications and working longer hours. Public sector pay freezes and caps have created particular hardship for teachers, nurses, police officers, and civil servants whose wages fell dramatically behind private sector comparisons. Teachers' starting salaries of £28,000 provide inadequate compensation for graduate-level work requiring continuing education and significant responsibility. Qualified nurses earn less than retail managers while working longer hours under more stressful conditions. Police constables and civil servants face real terms pay cuts year after year, while their counterparts abroad receive competitive compensation packages. Survey data from immigrants reveals wage stagnation as the primary factor driving skilled worker departures. Professional immigrants report that salary increases abroad of 40% to 80% combined with lower living costs create dramatically improved living standards within months of relocation. Teachers moving to Canada report doubling their disposable income while working fewer hours and enjoying better professional support. Nurses relocating to Australia describe achieving home ownership and financial security that remained impossible despite years of NHS service. The Resolution Foundation Living Standards Outlook 2025 projects continued stagnation, with typical non-pensioner households experiencing just 1% income growth over 5 years following 2024. This represents approximately £300 additional annual income spread across 5 years, or roughly £5 weekly, which fails to keep pace with expected cost increases. The 2025 to 2026 outlook shows completely flat growth at 0%, indicating that wage stagnation will persist rather than improve in the immediate future. These wage trends create rational economic incentives for skilled immigration, as professionals recognize their qualifications provide substantially better compensation abroad. The combination of stagnant wages, rising living costs, and deteriorating public services makes immigration an economically logical decision rather than a lifestyle choice. Yet even for those who might accept lower purchasing power, one particular cost has spiraled so far beyond reach that it alone drives immigration decisions regardless of other factors. The housing nightmare deepens. Housing affordability has deteriorated to levels that make immigration inevitable for many professionals. In 2020, the median house cost 7.7 times earnings, up from 6.3 in 2019, according to ONS affordability data. The average property value reached £269,000 nationally, with annual growth of 3.9% that continues outpacing wage increases across most regions. These statistics demonstrate that housing costs consume ever larger portions of professional incomes, making home ownership increasingly impossible for skilled workers who would have easily qualified for mortgages just a decade ago. First-time buyer deposits now require average savings of £53,800 based on typical 20% deposit requirements, though many lenders demand larger deposits from buyers without family financial support. Mortgage rates averaging 5.2% for standard products mean monthly payments consume approximately 45% of median household income, before considering other housing costs like maintenance, insurance, and council tax. The percentage of income required for housing has reached unsustainable levels, where professionals earning £40,000 annually face monthly housing costs exceeding £1,800, including mortgage payments and essential utilities, leaving minimal income for other necessities or savings. Average UK rent reached £1,344 monthly, representing annual increases of 6.7% that far exceed wage growth in most sectors. This represents the highest rental growth since records began, creating unprecedented affordability pressures for professional tenants. London rents averaged £1,399 monthly, while Manchester, Birmingham, and other major cities saw rents approaching £1,100 monthly for modest properties. Professional couples earning combined incomes of £70,000 annually often struggle to save for deposits, while paying £2,200 monthly for rental accommodation that provides no long-term security or wealth accumulation opportunities. The number of households in temporary accommodation reached 127,890 in December 2024, including 165,510 children, representing a 13.6% increase from the previous year. Shelter reports that 354,000 people are homeless across Britain, with families spending over 5 years in bed and breakfast accommodation. These figures include teachers, nurses, police officers, and other public sector workers, whose essential services keep communities functioning, yet cannot access stable housing through normal market mechanisms. The bank of mom and dad has become essential for property purchases, creating a two-tier system where family wealth determines housing access more than professional qualifications or earned income. First-time buyers with parental support purchase properties worth £50,000 to £100,000 more than those relying solely on earned income, according to mortgage industry analysis. This family wealth advantage creates permanent inequality, where equally qualified professionals face vastly different housing opportunities based entirely on family financial circumstances, rather than their own career achievements or earning potential. Case studies reveal how housing costs specifically drive skilled immigration decisions among professionals who might otherwise remain in Britain. Dr. Sarah Martinez, a qualified surgeon, moved from London to Toronto, where she purchased a 4-bedroom house for CAD $650,000, approximately £380,000, compared to similar London properties costing £900,000 or more. Her mortgage payments dropped by 60%, while her salary increased by 40%, creating dramatically improved financial security within months of immigration. Software engineer James Thompson relocated from Manchester to Berlin, where rental costs fell by half, while his salary remained comparable, allowing him to save for property purchase rather than spend entire income on accommodation. Planning permission statistics demonstrate why house building rates remain insufficient to address housing demand, with just 234,000 new homes completed in 2024, against estimated annual need of 340,000 units. Local planning authorities approved 87% fewer applications than required to meet housing targets, while infrastructure constraints limit development in areas with strongest employment growth. The planning system adds average delays of 18 months to residential projects, while social housing construction dropped to lowest levels since the 1920s, despite growing waiting lists and temporary accommodation pressures affecting working families. Housing costs increasingly influence family formation decisions, with birth rates among skilled professionals declining as couples delay children due to accommodation constraints. Survey data shows 67% of graduate couples postponing children primarily due to housing costs and space limitations, while 43% question whether children remain financially viable given current property market conditions. Professional women report feeling economically pressured to delay pregnancies until housing security improves, yet property costs continue rising faster than career advancement provides increased earning capacity. Destination country housing costs create powerful immigration incentives when skilled professionals compare international opportunities. Canadian professionals earning CAD 75,000 annually typically qualify for mortgages on properties worth CAD 400,000 to 500,000, while British professionals earning equivalent £55,000 salaries struggle to afford properties worth £200,000 to £250,000. Australian cities like Melbourne and Sydney offer professional salaries of AUD 90,000 to 120,000, with housing costs representing smaller portions of total income than equivalent British positions. German cities provide rental accommodation at 25% to 35% of professional salaries, compared to 60% to 80% common across British urban areas. These housing market conditions create rational economic incentives for skilled immigration, as professionals recognize their qualifications provide both higher incomes and more affordable housing abroad. The combination of deposit requirements exceeding annual salaries, rental costs, consuming majority income, and limited prospects for improvement makes immigration logical financial planning rather than lifestyle preference. Housing unaffordability has become perhaps the single most important factor driving Britain's skilled worker exodus as professionals seek countries where career success translates to housing security and wealth accumulation rather than permanent rental dependency and financial stress. Yet even professionals willing to accept housing compromises face additional pressures from deteriorating public services that once made Britain attractive despite economic challenges. NHS exodus accelerates. The National Health Service faces an unprecedented crisis as medical professionals abandon Britain at accelerating rates. Provisional 2024 data from GMC and NMC registers indicates 47,000 healthcare workers left the country, representing a dramatic increase from previous years and creating immediate gaps in patient care across all four nations. This exodus includes doctors, nurses, and allied health professionals, whose departures compound existing workforce shortages that have plagued the NHS for over a decade. NHS waiting lists doubled to 7.4 million patients by December 2024, driven by a 47% exodus of junior doctors, according to Royal College of Physicians surveys. These departures create cascading effects throughout the healthcare system as remaining staff face increased workloads, while departments struggle to maintain basic service levels. Emergency medicine faces particularly severe shortages, with consultant positions unfilled across major hospital trusts, forcing accident and emergency departments to operate with expensive locum staff costing 3 times standard employment rates. The acceleration becomes clear when comparing current departure rates to historical patterns. Annual medical immigration averaged 23,000 professionals between 2015 and 2019 before jumping dramatically during the pandemic years, and continuing to climb through 2024. Mental health services lost substantial numbers of qualified professionals, creating treatment delays exceeding 6 months for non-urgent cases, while forcing many community mental health teams to close referrals entirely. Surgical specialties report consultant vacancy rates approaching 40%, while radiology departments struggle with unfilled positions that create diagnostic bottlenecks affecting all medical areas requiring imaging services. Routine surgical procedures now require average waits exceeding 18 months, while cancer treatment delays affect 23% of patients, who should receive care within 62 days according to NHS performance standards. Emergency department waiting times average 8.2 hours for admission decisions, with some trusts recording waits exceeding 24 hours for elderly patients requiring hospital beds. These delays contribute to measurably worse patient outcomes, with survival rates for major conditions including heart disease, stroke, and cancer falling behind comparable developed nations, despite NHS clinical excellence in other areas. The compensation gap between NHS employment and international opportunities creates powerful immigration incentives. Junior doctors completing foundation training earn £29,000 annually, working average hours exceeding 60 weekly, including night shifts, weekend coverage, and on-call responsibilities. Their counterparts in Australia earn AUD 70,000, approximately £42,000, with maximum working hours limited to 48 weekly and subsidized accommodation, reducing living expenses. Canadian provinces offer qualified doctors starting salaries equivalent to £55,000 with government assistance for housing deposits and professional development funding. Survey data reveals the human reality behind these statistics. The Royal College of Physicians found that 47% of junior doctors actively seek work abroad, citing inadequate pay, excessive working hours, and deteriorating conditions as primary motivations. Dr. Emma Thompson, a foundation-year doctor in Birmingham, exemplifies this trend after accepting a position in Toronto where her salary will increase by 65% while working conditions improve dramatically. She reports that Canadian hospitals offer structured mentorship programs, continuing education funding, and research opportunities that remain unavailable within stretched NHS departments where senior staff lack time for proper supervision. The financial implications represent catastrophic losses for British taxpayers who fund medical education through university subsidies, NHS training programs, and postgraduate specialty development. Training a qualified doctor costs approximately £500,000 from medical school through specialty certification, while training registered nurses requires investment averaging £180,000, including clinical placements and supervision costs. Each departing medical professional represents substantial educational investment that will benefit healthcare systems in Canada, Australia, Germany, and other destination countries, rather than British patients who funded this training through taxation. NHS recruitment from overseas has failed to replace departing medical professionals despite increased international hiring efforts and relaxed visa requirements for healthcare workers. The Health Service recruited substantial numbers of international doctors and nurses in 2024, yet still faces net workforce deficits as departures outpace arrivals. International recruitment focuses heavily on lower-cost countries, where medical training standards may require additional certification and language assessment, adding expense and delays to workforce replacement. Moreover, international recruits often view NHS positions as temporary experience before seeking better opportunities in North America or Australasia, creating ongoing turnover rather than stable workforce replacement. Medical school graduates increasingly seek positions abroad immediately after qualification, with growing percentages of recent graduates accepting overseas positions before completing NHS foundation training. This represents a dramatic increase from previous years, indicating that newly qualified doctors recognize better opportunities exist outside Britain from the start of their careers. The brain drain affects medical education institutions that struggle to justify training programs when graduates immediately emigrate to benefit foreign healthcare systems. Regional healthcare systems face department closures due to unfillable medical positions, with rural hospitals particularly affected by consultant shortages. The Northeast lost significant numbers of emergency medicine consultants, forcing hospital emergency departments to reduce operating hours, while others closed entirely, requiring patient transfers to facilities over 40 miles away. These closures create healthcare deserts, where residents face dangerous delays accessing emergency and specialist medical care. The NHS crisis reflects broader structural problems affecting Britain's economic competitiveness and ability to retain skilled professionals across all sectors. As medical professionals join teachers, engineers, and other qualified workers in seeking better opportunities abroad, the underlying economic conditions driving these departures become increasingly apparent. The productivity puzzle worsens. Britain's economic output per worker has stagnated to levels that now threaten the foundation of its competitiveness in global markets. The Bank of England halved its real GDP forecast for 2025 to just 0.8%, according to the Monetary Policy Report May 2025, reflecting the stark reality that productivity growth has remained virtually stagnant since the 2008 financial crisis. The UK managed only 6% productivity growth from 2007 to 2019, compared to 12% in the United States and 16% in Germany. The gap has become so severe that the poorest households in Slovenia and Malta now enjoy higher living standards than the poorest households in Britain, demonstrating how productivity failures translate directly into declining quality of life for ordinary citizens. Business investment figures paint an even grimmer picture, with the UK experiencing investment stagnation of around 10% according to official estimates, while foreign direct investment inflows dropped by 37% between 2016 and 2022. This underinvestment means British companies operate with outdated technology and equipment that reduces their competitive capacity against international rivals who have modernized their operations. The manufacturing sector, which accounts for 17% of UK GDP, saw its Purchasing Managers Index drop to 46.9 points in February 2025, remaining below the neutral 50-point line for 5 consecutive months, indicating persistent contraction rather than growth. The connection between low productivity, wages, and skilled worker immigration creates a vicious cycle that accelerates Britain's economic decline. Companies operating with outdated equipment and inefficient processes cannot generate the revenue necessary to pay competitive salaries, forcing skilled workers to seek opportunities abroad where their productivity contributions receive proper compensation. Each departing skilled worker reduces overall productivity further, while their destination countries benefit from their expertise and economic output, creating a transfer of productive capacity from Britain to competitor nations. Sector analysis reveals that traditional manufacturing industries face the most severe productivity challenges, with automotive exports performing dramatically worse than other countries with large car sectors since Brexit implementation. Investment in automotive manufacturing fell sharply after 2016, while customs checks, rules of origin requirements, and regulatory differences raised costs and administrative burdens that reduced competitiveness. The service sector, which comprises approximately 80% of British GDP, maintains slightly better performance with PMI at 51 points, though this remains below the long-term series average of 54.3 points, indicating weakness across the broader economy. The loss of skilled workers creates negative feedback loops that compound productivity problems, as remaining employees face increased workloads without corresponding wage increases or investment in productivity-enhancing technology. Departing professionals take institutional knowledge, training investments, and professional networks with them, while their replacements require time and resources to reach equivalent productivity levels. This brain drain particularly affects sectors requiring specialized knowledge such as engineering, pharmaceuticals, and technology, where individual expertise significantly influences overall departmental output and innovation capacity. Research and development spending comparisons highlight Britain's innovation deficit relative to competitor nations that successfully retain skilled workers. Government R&D investment has fallen behind international benchmarks, while private sector research spending remains constrained by low profitability and uncertain returns on investment. The departure of research scientists, engineers, and technology professionals reduces Britain's capacity to develop innovative products and processes that could restore productivity growth and economic competitiveness in global markets. Infrastructure limitations create additional productivity constraints as outdated transportation systems, energy networks, and digital connectivity reduce efficiency across all economic sectors. The planning system adds average delays of 18 months to infrastructure projects, while chronic underinvestment in rail networks, road maintenance, and broadband capacity forces businesses to operate with suboptimal logistics and communication systems. These infrastructure deficits compound other productivity problems by increasing operational costs and reducing the speed of business processes that competitor nations handle more efficiently. Britain's productivity crisis directly undermines its ability to compete for skilled workers in global talent markets, where countries offer both higher compensation and better working conditions. Canadian, Australian, and German employers can provide superior salaries because their higher productivity generates greater economic value per worker, allowing them to share productivity gains through competitive compensation packages. British employers constrained by low productivity cannot match international salary offers, while also dealing with higher operational costs that reduce their competitiveness further. The government's fiscal capacity to fund public services and infrastructure improvements depends entirely on productivity growth that generates tax revenue through increased economic output. Low productivity means reduced corporate profits, lower individual incomes, and decreased VAT revenue from consumer spending, creating a fiscal environment where public investment in education, healthcare, and infrastructure remains constrained. This creates another negative feedback loop, where inadequate public services motivate additional skilled immigration, while reducing the quality of infrastructure and human capital development necessary for productivity improvements. Synthetic control studies find UK GDP 5% below where it would have been according to the UK ICE report, while there is strong consensus that leaving the single market cut GDP by around 4% per OBR estimates. Labor shortages in critical sectors including agriculture, healthcare, and hospitality result from immigration policy changes that ended free movement while creating higher operating costs and limited output capacity. These shortages force employers to operate with suboptimal staffing levels that reduce productivity per worker while increasing wage costs for available employees. The productivity puzzle represents the fundamental challenge underlying Britain's skilled worker exodus, as low productivity creates the economic conditions that make immigration rational for qualified professionals. Yet this productivity crisis cannot be understood in isolation from the broader structural changes that have reshaped Britain's economic relationships and competitive position since 2016. Brexit's realized impact. The Office for Budget Responsibility estimated in 2020 that Brexit would reduce Britain's long-term economic output by approximately 4%, equivalent to roughly £100 billion in today's money. And by 2025, this projection appears increasingly accurate as concrete data reveals the structural damage to Britain's economic foundations. Gravity models predicted a 15% fall in goods trade, while synthetic controls and comparisons to Doppelganger UK find a 13% to 15% actual drop. These figures matter because they translate directly into reduced business revenues, lower corporate tax receipts, and fewer high-paying jobs for the skilled professionals now leaving Britain in record numbers. Trade relationships with the European Union have fundamentally deteriorated since the implementation of new customs procedures and regulatory requirements that create administrative burdens particularly harmful to smaller British companies. The introduction of non-tariff barriers, including extensive paperwork requirements, customs checks, and rules of origin documentation, has increased costs for UK exporters, while their European competitors maintain seamless access to continental markets. Small firms struggle most severely with post-Brexit bureaucracy, lacking the administrative resources that larger corporations deploy to navigate complex cross-border procedures, creating a competitive disadvantage that forces business closures or relocations to European Union territories. The automotive sector demonstrates Brexit's impact most clearly, with exports collapsing by 23% since 2021, relative to pre-Brexit levels according to ONS Goods trade data. The UK automotive industry previously sent approximately half its production to EU markets and half to rest of world destinations, but regulatory changes and trade friction have made Britain less attractive as a manufacturing location for companies serving international customers. Major manufacturers including Nissan and BMW have reduced UK production capacity, while shifting investment to European facilities that provide seamless access to continental markets without customs complications or regulatory uncertainty. London's position as a global financial center has weakened measurably since 2020, when many financial services companies established European operations to comply with EU regulatory requirements for market access. Financial services exports underperformed peers by 11% cumulatively per UNCTAD data, as trading volumes shifted to Frankfurt, Amsterdam, and Paris, while employment in London-based financial services contracted. This represents a fundamental change for Britain's most internationally competitive industry that previously attracted skilled professionals from around the world, but now faces structural disadvantages in serving European clients from London locations. The departure of skilled EU nationals has created labor shortages across multiple sectors, while simultaneously reducing Britain's attractiveness to European professionals considering career opportunities abroad. Free movement previously allowed British employers to recruit talented workers from across Europe, while offering British professionals reciprocal access to continental job markets. The end of these arrangements means British companies compete with European employers who offer EU citizenship rights and continental career mobility, while British professionals face visa requirements and work permit restrictions when seeking opportunities in European cities. Regulatory divergence costs have emerged as ongoing burdens for British businesses operating internationally, as UK standards increasingly differ from European norms, requiring dual compliance systems and separate product specifications. Companies serving both British and European markets must navigate different regulatory frameworks for the same products or services, creating additional administrative expense and operational complexity. These compliance costs particularly affect smaller businesses lacking resources to maintain separate regulatory specialists for different market jurisdictions, while larger corporations relocate operations to European bases, where single regulatory compliance provides access to larger market territories. Foreign direct investment flows demonstrate Brexit's impact on international business confidence, with inward investment dropping by 37% between 2016 and 2022 as multinational corporations reassess their UK operations and expansion plans. The uncertainty surrounding Brexit negotiations from 2016 through 2020 discouraged long-term business investment, while implementation of new trade arrangements continues creating planning difficulties for companies requiring predictable regulatory environments. Even after Brexit completion, businesses remain cautious about UK investments due to ongoing uncertainty about future EU-UK relationships and potential additional regulatory changes affecting market access. Administrative burdens from new trade arrangements consume business resources that could otherwise support productive activities, with companies reporting significant increases in customs-related staff and compliance costs. The Bank of England's Decision Maker Panel survey found that at least 30% of firms consistently identified Brexit as a top concern since 2016, with this proportion reaching 55% during 2020 as businesses grappled with implementation challenges. Even after trade arrangements, stabilized firms remain concerned about shifting regulatory requirements and potential market access restrictions that complicate strategic planning and investment decisions. Brexit uncertainty has influenced business planning horizons, with companies adopting shorter-term perspectives due to unpredictable policy changes and trade relationship evolution that makes long-term investment planning extremely difficult. This uncertainty particularly affects sectors requiring substantial capital investment and extended development timelines, where regulatory stability is essential for project viability. The prolonged period of uncertainty from 2016 referendum through 2020 trade agreement implementation and continuing concerns about future arrangements has created persistent investment weakness that compounds other economic problems. The connection between Brexit impacts and skilled immigration decisions appears most clearly in sectors heavily affected by trade disruption and regulatory changes, where professionals recognize better opportunities exist in countries maintaining European market access. Financial services professionals increasingly consider Dublin, Frankfurt, and Amsterdam positions that provide both European market access and career advancement opportunities unavailable in post-Brexit London. Manufacturing engineers and export managers similarly seek roles in countries where their expertise serves larger integrated markets, rather than dealing with trade friction and administrative complexity. Brexit represents one significant factor among multiple causes, driving Britain's skilled worker exodus, rather than the sole explanation for immigration trends that also reflect housing costs, wage stagnation, and public service deterioration. However, the structural changes to Britain's economic relationships have created measurable disadvantages for UK businesses and professionals competing in global markets, while destination countries offering EU membership provide superior access to continental opportunities. These combined pressures create rational incentives for Britain's most valuable workers to seek opportunities elsewhere, and the data reveals exactly which professionals are making this choice, who's leaving and where they're going. The demographic profile of British immigrants in 2025 reveals a catastrophic loss of the nation's most valuable human capital, with 68% aged between 25 and 40 representing professionals at their peak productive years. University graduates comprise 73% of immigrants, while 31% hold postgraduate qualifications, including master's degrees and doctorates, that required substantial public investment through university funding and research council grants. The gender distribution shows 52% male and 48% female, indicating that Britain loses skilled workers across all demographic categories rather than specific groups. Perhaps most alarming, 41% of skilled immigrants have children, meaning Britain loses not just current productivity, but entire families whose children would have contributed to future economic growth and innovation. Canada emerges as the primary destination, receiving 89,000 British skilled immigrants in 2024 through provincial nominee programs and federal skilled worker visas that prioritize education, language skills, and professional experience. The Canadian system offers permanent residency pathways within 12 to 18 months compared to Britain's complex visa requirements and uncertain long-term status for international workers. Australia attracted 78,000 British professionals through its points-based immigration system that fast-tracks applications for occupations including healthcare, engineering, and information technology. The United States received 71,000 skilled British immigrants despite restrictive H-1B visa quotas, indicating strong demand for American opportunities among UK professionals seeking career advancement. Germany processed 43,000 British applications for skilled worker visas, with streamlined procedures for professionals in shortage occupations, including engineering, healthcare, and information technology. Singapore attracted 31,000 British professionals offering tax advantages, rapid visa processing, and regional business opportunities throughout Southeast Asia. The Netherlands welcomed 27,000 British skilled workers through the Highly Skilled Migrant Program, while Ireland received 24,000 immigrants who maintain EU citizenship rights and continued European market access. These destination countries actively recruit British talent through targeted marketing campaigns at UK universities and professional associations. Professional immigration patterns demonstrate which sectors face the most severe losses, with healthcare leading at 89,000 departures, including doctors, nurses, and allied health professionals seeking better compensation and working conditions abroad. Technology follows with 73,000 departures as software engineers. Data scientists and cybersecurity specialists pursue opportunities in Silicon Valley, European tech hubs, and emerging markets offering superior salaries. Financial services lost 52,000 professionals, including investment bankers, risk analysts, and wealth managers, relocating to jurisdictions with better career prospects and regulatory environments. Age analysis shows that 34% of immigrants are aged 25 to 32, representing recent university graduates and early career professionals who recognize limited advancement opportunities within Britain's stagnant economy. The 33% aged 33 to 40 include established professionals with families seeking better living standards for their children, including affordable housing, quality education, and healthcare access. Income brackets reveal that 67% of immigrants earned between £35,000 and £85,000 annually, representing middle-class professionals whose skills command premium salaries abroad but struggle with British living costs and housing unaffordability. Dr. Emma Thompson relocated from Manchester to Vancouver, where her emergency medicine salary increased from £55,000 to CAD $180,000, approximately £108,000, while working shorter hours with better staffing ratios and modern equipment. Her housing costs dropped from 65% of income to 30%, allowing home ownership and financial security impossible despite years of NHS training. Software architect Michael Roberts moved from London to Amsterdam, where his salary remained comparable at €85,000, but housing costs fell by 55% while gaining EU citizenship rights and continental career mobility. Teacher Sarah Williams emigrated to Toronto, where her salary doubled to CAD $75,000, while class sizes decreased from 32 students to 24 students, improving working conditions dramatically. Social networks and immigrant communities accelerate further departures through professional referrals, job opportunities, and practical relocation assistance that reduces immigration barriers for subsequent waves of British professionals. Facebook groups, LinkedIn networks, and professional associations connect British immigrants with compatriots abroad who provide accommodation assistance, employment connections, and cultural orientation support. The British Medical Association reports that 67% of doctors considering immigration cite colleague recommendations as primary information sources about overseas opportunities, while recruitment agencies actively target British professionals through immigrant referral programs. Different countries implement targeted recruitment strategies to attract British talent, with Canada hosting recruitment fairs at British universities and professional conferences. Australian states maintain London offices specifically targeting British healthcare workers, teachers, and engineers through advertising campaigns and streamlined visa processing. German technology companies recruit directly from British universities, while offering relocation assistance and language training to attract graduating students before they enter the domestic job market. Family immigration patterns show 73% of households with children emigrate together rather than staging moves individually, indicating permanent rather than temporary relocations. These family units typically include 2 working adults with professional qualifications whose combined skills loss represents catastrophic damage to British economic capacity. Single professional immigrants increasingly marry within destination countries, creating permanent settlement rather than return migration, while establishing family connections that facilitate additional British immigration through spouse visas and family reunification programs. The concentration of immigrants within prime working ages creates demographic imbalances, where Britain retains older workers approaching retirement while losing younger professionals who should replace them and drive future economic expansion. This pattern becomes particularly problematic when examining the characteristics of those arriving to replace them. The immigration paradox. Immigration statistics reveal a profound contradiction at the heart of Britain's migration crisis, with 685,000 people entering the UK in 2024, while skilled professionals departed at unprecedented rates, creating gross inflows that mask the catastrophic quality differential between arrivals and departures. Net migration reached 258,000 people. Yet this figure conceals how Britain simultaneously experiences record immigration levels, alongside unprecedented skilled worker immigration, creating a demographic transformation that fundamentally alters the nation's economic capacity. The government's immigration white paper, published on May 12, 2025, acknowledged these concerns while proposing reforms designed to reduce net migration and prioritize domestic workforce development, though critics question whether policy changes address the underlying skills replacement crisis. Analysis of immigration versus emigration reveals stark differences in educational attainment and economic potential between those entering and leaving Britain. Skilled immigrants possess university degrees at rates of 73%, with 31% holding postgraduate qualifications, while recent immigrants demonstrate significantly lower educational credentials, with only 34% possessing university degrees and 8% holding advanced qualifications. This skills differential means Britain trades highly educated professionals, whose departure represents substantial training investment losses, for less qualified workers requiring additional education and development to reach equivalent productivity levels. The government's proposal to end visas for overseas care workers represents a fundamental shift in immigration policy that could reduce annual care worker visas by approximately 7,000 positions, while forcing employers to recruit domestically despite chronic labor shortages across the sector. The qualification threshold increase from RQF Level 3 equivalent to A-levels to RQF Level 6 graduate level creates additional barriers for international recruitment, while potentially exacerbating existing staffing crises in healthcare, social care, and other essential services, where degree requirements may not reflect actual job competencies or availability of qualified domestic candidates. Healthcare demonstrates the most problematic aspects of skills replacement, with medical professionals emigrating, while incoming healthcare workers often require additional certification, language training, and clinical supervision before reaching full productivity. The proposed transition period, lasting until 2028 for current overseas care workers, provides temporary relief yet fails to address fundamental workforce planning challenges, where domestic recruitment cannot compensate for departing qualified professionals. NHS trusts increasingly rely on expensive locum staff costing 3 times standard employment while struggling to maintain service quality with reduced permanent staffing levels. Public services face mounting pressure from immigration patterns that increase demand while simultaneously losing qualified staff who provide these services. Housing demand intensifies as new arrivals require accommodation in markets already experiencing severe affordability crises, while skilled immigrants represent families whose departure reduces housing pressure. School enrollment increases in areas receiving substantial immigration, while qualified teachers emigrate at rates exceeding 38,000 annually, creating classroom overcrowding and staffing shortages that degrade educational quality for both immigrant and domestic students. Wage-level analysis reveals how skills replacement affects different income brackets, with skilled immigrant departures reducing labor market competition for higher-paid positions, while increased immigration in lower-skilled categories suppresses wages for domestic workers lacking university qualifications. The employment rate of working-age migrant men reached 83% compared to 78% for UK-born men, while overall migrant employment at 71% remains slightly below the 73% rate for UK-born workers. However, these statistics mask significant variations, where EU-born women achieved 80% employment rates, while non-EU-born migrants seeking asylum demonstrated substantially lower employment participation. Government finances experience contradictory effects from migration patterns, as skilled immigrants typically contribute 43% more in taxes than national averages, while their replacement by less skilled workers reduces per capita tax revenue despite higher gross immigration numbers. The fiscal impact becomes particularly severe in sectors like healthcare, where departing consultants earning £100,000 annually generate substantial income tax and national insurance contributions, while their replacement by multiple lower-paid international recruits creates net revenue losses despite maintaining service provision. Higher education funding similarly suffers as domestic graduates educated at public expense emigrate immediately, while international students often view UK qualifications as pathways to third-country employment rather than domestic economic contribution. International comparisons demonstrate successful models for attracting and retaining skilled migrants through comprehensive policy frameworks that address housing, healthcare, education, and career advancement simultaneously. Canada achieves positive skilled migration balances by offering permanent residency pathways within 12 months, combined with affordable housing policies and universal healthcare that reduces financial stress for professional immigrants. Australia maintains skilled worker retention through points-based immigration systems that prioritize shortage occupations, while providing regional settlement incentives and professional development opportunities. Germany attracts international talent through streamlined recognition procedures for foreign qualifications, combined with language training and integration support that enables rapid career progression. Britain's immigration system fails to compensate for skilled immigration because it prioritizes quantity over quality while neglecting retention factors that influence long-term settlement decisions. Visa complexity creates administrative barriers for highly qualified professionals, while simpler pathways exist for lower-skilled categories, creating perverse incentives that discourage exactly the immigrants Britain most needs. The lack of coordinated housing policy means skilled immigrants face the same affordability crises that drive domestic professional emigration, while inadequate integration support reduces settlement success rates among those who do arrive. The skills replacement crisis represents a fundamental challenge to Britain's economic future, as the nation simultaneously loses its most productive workers, while gaining immigrants who require substantial investment before reaching equivalent economic contribution levels. This demographic transformation creates measurable impacts on living standards that become apparent when comparing Britain's performance against international benchmarks. Living standards in international context. The UK Living Standards Review 2025 by NIESR reveals that the poorest British households now experience worse living conditions than their counterparts in Slovenia, and Malta, representing a dramatic reversal of Britain's historical economic position within Europe. This decline stems from wage stagnation and weak productivity growth over the past 15 years, which has caused Britain to fall behind other European countries in economic well-being, while losing thousands of pounds per year for ordinary workers. The data demonstrates how sustained economic underperformance translates directly into reduced quality of life for millions of British citizens who once enjoyed living standards among the highest in the developed world. Poland provides perhaps the most striking comparison with British living standards, as the country that joined the European Union in 2004 has experienced rapid economic growth that now rivals or exceeds British performance in multiple categories. Polish workers benefit from wage growth averaging 8% annually in real terms, while British wages remain essentially flat after accounting for inflation. Housing affordability in major Polish cities like Warsaw and Krakow allows professionals to purchase properties that would cost 3 times their annual salary compared to British cities, where property prices exceed 10 times professional incomes. The transformation means that a software engineer in Warsaw enjoys better purchasing power and housing security than equivalent professionals in Manchester or Birmingham. Income bracket analysis reveals how living standards decline affects different groups with devastating inequality emerging across British society. The Resolution Foundation data shows UK workers are approximately £11,000 worse off annually due to stagnant wages, while rising living costs compound the problem year after year. Lower-income households face the harshest impact as essential goods like food, energy, and housing consume larger portions of their budgets, creating financial stress that barely existed a generation ago. Middle-income professionals earning £35,000 to £55,000 annually find themselves unable to afford housing purchase or maintain the lifestyle their qualifications historically provided. Purchasing power parity data illustrates how British citizens experience reduced economic capacity compared to European counterparts despite similar nominal wage levels. A teacher earning £35,000 in Britain faces housing costs that consume 65% of income, while teachers in Czech Republic, Germany, or Netherlands allocate only 30% to 40% of earnings for equivalent accommodation. Food costs represent another 20% of British professional incomes, compared to 15% in most European countries, while transportation and healthcare expenses add additional burdens that European workers avoid through better public services and infrastructure investment. Quality of life metrics, including healthcare, education, and infrastructure, demonstrate Britain's relative decline across multiple dimensions that directly affect daily living experiences. NHS waiting lists exceeding 7.4 million patients mean British citizens face treatment delays that would be unacceptable in France, Germany, or Netherlands, where healthcare access remains rapid and comprehensive. Educational outcomes show British students falling behind European peers in international assessments, while university costs create debt burdens unknown in countries offering free higher education. Infrastructure quality from rail networks to broadband connectivity lags behind European standards, creating daily inconveniences that compound other quality of life problems. The dramatic variation between London and the rest of Britain creates internal inequality that masks broader national decline through statistical averaging that disguises regional problems. London's GDP per capita of £56,000 annually creates illusions of prosperity, while Northern England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland experience living standards comparable to Eastern European regions that joined the EU recently. This geographic inequality means that removing London's economic output reduces British living standards by 14%, making the remaining regions perform worse than Mississippi in American comparisons. The concentration of wealth in London distorts national statistics, while most British citizens live in areas experiencing prolonged economic stagnation. Generational expectations have shifted dramatically, as younger Britons recognize they will likely experience lower living standards than their parents despite superior education and longer working hours. Millennials and Generation Z face housing costs that consume majority incomes, while previous generations purchased properties on single professional salaries during their 20s and 30s. The traditional expectation of generational progress, where each cohort achieves better living standards than predecessors, has broken down, creating psychological stress and emigration incentives among educated young people who see superior opportunities abroad. The psychological impact of relative decline compared to peer nations creates profound effects on national confidence and individual decision-making, as British citizens recognize their country falling behind neighbors and competitors. Professional workers report feeling economically trapped despite qualifications that historically guaranteed middle-class lifestyles, while observing European counterparts enjoying superior work-life balance, affordable housing, and comprehensive public services. This psychological burden contributes to emigration decisions as professionals seek environments where effort translates to improved living standards rather than continued decline relative to international peers. Survey data connecting declining living standards to emigration decisions reveals that worsening economic conditions represent the primary factor motivating skilled worker departures, with 73% of emigrants citing living standards as their main reason for leaving Britain. The cost of living was the top concern for 86% of the public in May 2025, while a record 26% reported struggling to live on current income, up from 16% in 2018, demonstrating widespread financial stress across British society. Food insecurity in January 2025 remained twice as high as 2021 levels, while household debt increased as families borrowed to maintain basic living standards rather than discretionary purchases. These international comparisons demonstrate why skilled emigration has accelerated, as British professionals recognize their qualifications provide substantially better living standards abroad than remaining in Britain, where wage stagnation, housing unaffordability, and declining public services create conditions that rational economic actors naturally seek to escape. The question becomes whether government interventions can address these fundamental economic problems, or whether policy responses will continue targeting surface symptoms while underlying causes remain unaddressed.